What up, Screen Fiends? I'm GB, and you're tuned in to Headz TV, where we like to discuss all the wonderful things appearing on your movie and your TV screens. So a couple of videos ago, I did a video about Marvel, the MCU versus the DCEU. So the Marvel Cinematic Universe against the DC Cinematic Universe, and it came out really, really long. So I want to break them down into kind of segments, and hopefully that works better for me and it's a little bit shorter. So I'm going to match each. Marvel has way more movies, so of course I can't go movie for movie. So I'm going to match each DCEU movie with a Marvel movie that corresponds to it. Themes, timing it came out, things like that. And we'll do our best to compare the two to see maybe where the two differ and why one may be better than the other. Okay, so in this video, where this episode is going to be about Iron Man versus Man of Steel. Why those two? Iron Man was the movie that kicked off the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the first one, and Man of Steel was the first movie in the DC Cinematic Universe, so I thought only right to compare those two movies. Because Man of Steel really doesn't match up to too many of the other Marvel movies, so we'll go with Iron Man. Alright, so I like both of the movies. Man of Steel is, my favorite of the DCEU movies, and Iron Man happens to be one of my favorite of the MCU movies, even up to date. I think Iron Man is a near perfect movie. If I was to compare the two of them next to each other, I would say I like Iron Man more than Man of Steel, much more. I think Iron Man is a great movie, whereas I think Man of Steel is a good movie at best. Alright, so first, let's talk about the characters. Iron Man, Jon Favreau, Feige, and everyone else involved in creating that character, Robert Downey Jr., had an understanding for that character. Tony Stark is Tony Stark. He's actually better than Tony Stark in the comics. I never liked Tony Stark. I liked Iron Man. I always thought Tony Stark was a bit of an asshole. But Robert Downey Jr.'s brand of assholism is so likable that he makes Tony Stark just as likable, if not more likable, than Iron Man himself. Tony Stark, Robert Downey Jr., makes the Iron Man character. They did a great job with the casting, but not only the casting, the way that they crafted the character, the way they wrote the character, the way they had his story arc flow, made it a near perfect, a better than perfect representation of the character. There is nothing wrong with that character in that movie whatsoever. Man of Steel, you all know how I feel about the way they've handled Superman thus far. In the first movie, I get how he was brooding and mopey and kind of depressed most of the movie. I get that totally, 100%. But by the end of that movie, his story arc should have been that. Trying to become a hero, realizing what a hero is, and then realizing that a hero is more than just physically stopping the bad guy, physically saving the cat, physically pulling the bus from the river, right? It's more about not only that, but it's also about being a symbol of hope, to inspire people, to lift people up, to give people something to strive to be. Much like how the President of the United States should be, where people could look up to him, right? I'm not saying that's the case right now, or it isn't, but that's a perfect example. This is someone in a position where it's not only what he does, but it's what he portrays. It's how he makes people feel and think and act, right? And that's what Superman should have been by at least the end of that movie, and he wasn't. Okay, so there's one for one. Iron Man as a character, they nailed it. The casting for Superman was perfect, but they didn't nail the character totally. They didn't write him totally correct. So that is not a total fail, but it's not a total win either. Okay. Now let's talk about the villain of the piece. We'll start with Iron Man again. Obadiah Stane, Ironmonger, and the Ten Rings. were the villains of that movie. Perfect villains, you couldn't get any better. On one hand, you have the Ten Rings, who basically kicked off the whole Iron Man thing, and got Tony to basically create Iron Man and start to rethink his business practices and the way he lived his life. And then you had Obadiah Stane, who was a business partner who was pushing the business in a way that Tony didn't want to go, and he was all corrupt and everything. A lot of people complain about these types of things. Man of Steel was guilty of this too. But for the first, as far as Ironmonger goes, for the first movie, I think every superhero should go against a villain who has similar powers. Because the first movie, the hero is learning how to deal with their powers and become a hero. So who better to go against than someone who has a similar power set, right? So they both nailed the villain, because Zod was the perfect first villain for Man of Steel. To have someone of the same with the same abilities from the same place, and of the same race of people, where he's one of them, just like Obadiah Stane was Tony Stark's business partner and like an uncle figure to him growing up. So both of them have that family connection to the villain, similar power sets. I like that for the first movie. They both did that right. They both had a win for the villain, and both of the casting, Jeff Bridges and Michael Shannon, nailed it. Perfect. Can't complain one bit. Now let's get to the story arcs. Iron Man has a clear-cut story arc that is perfect for the character, perfect for any movie, let alone a superhero movie. You have arrogant, pompous, cocky warmonger who runs his business from profit, no matter how many lives get lost, how many people die, or whatever happens, right? Where the weapons go, whatever, it doesn't matter, as long as the buck keeps on rolling in. And then you have this terrible thing happen to him that was obviously orchestrated by his business partner. Maybe not obviously, but I'm sure Stane had something to do with the abduction of Tony. I don't know if they state it in the movie. I haven't seen it in so long. They may. And then, so you have him decide that now he's going to use his brain and his company and his money to make one last weapon, and that's the weapon that only he will have and only he will use to do good in the world, or so to speak, right? And then, by the end of the movie, you have him totally realize that who he is, who he should be, who he was supposed to be, and it's a satisfying story arc for that character. He goes from point A, basically being a douchebag, to point B, where he's, or I should say point Z, where he's now, I'm not going to say necessarily a totally changed person. He's still an asshole. He's still Tony Stark. He's still who he is. But he's using his talents and his money for something useful, not killing. Gotta love it, right? Now, Man of Steel, on the other hand, story arc should have been a similar story arc. He's learning his powers. He learns how to use them, how to fight with them. And, but he's still tortured by his past, not knowing his real father fully, only through holograms, and his Jonathan Kent dying and all of that stuff. And he's still dealing with that, so he's still the same character, still mopey, whatever. But by the end, he should have had a change in his character, and there was none. He does what he does, has a hard time killing Zod, does what he has to do, regrets it, which is great, but then out of that came nothing. Out of him finally killing Zod, did we ever get the realization that not only is killing wrong, of course it's spelled out for you in the scene that killing is wrong, right? But also that it's not just about stopping the threat physically, it's about showing the people that I'm above that, and I'm not something to be feared, I'm something to be, I don't want to say idolized, but you get what I'm saying. But it didn't go that way. He really doesn't have much of an arc. Yeah, he's trying to find himself to be a hero, and then he becomes that hero in defeating Zod, but then that's it. As far as character growth, There was none in Man of Steel. So that's a fail for Man of Steel, another win for Iron Man. I'm sorry. Yeah, I know I'm biased, whatever, but I love Superman too. I love Batman too. I don't love these movies as much as I should, but this is just the reality. So, and then of course all the special effects for both were fine. The writing, the dialogue for the most part was good in Iron Man. I mean, good in Man of Steel, great in Iron Man. I don't know. I liked Man of Steel. It was a good movie. It was decently crafted. It could have and should have been better. Iron Man was a near perfect movie. It had comedy, it had action, it had drama, it had excitement, it had cool special effects. Man of Steel, it had drama, it had a decent story. It didn't really have character growth. It didn't really have a very good plot. A lot of the other secondary characters, you weren't interested in their stories like I was interested in Pepper Potts. I was interested in Pepper Potts. She wasn't just a love interest. By the end of the movie, she's barely a love interest, Iron Man, watch them back to back. Iron Man, Man of Steel. All of you DCEU fans, all of you MCU fans, watch those two movies back to back and tell me which one is a more enjoyable experience in front of the screen. I guarantee you'll tell me Iron Man was at least slightly more enjoyable, if not much more. All right, that's it for this video. There'll be more to follow with the other DCEU and some other MCU movies, comparing them. Hopefully you like these. Let me know what you think. Sound off down below. You know the deal. Show me some love down there. And, yep, that's it for this video. I will see you next time.